Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, here we are, almost a mere 2 weeks away from actually heading into the ballot box to make our ultimate determination as to whom we believe is best qualified to be the next president of these United States of America. And as you are well aware, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, oftentimes look to history to determine exactly what is going on with our nation and some of the problems that we have encountered and the ways that we can overcome them. And one of the things that we've seen that's been particularly prevalent throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle is this notion of unreasoning fear. Fear that if you don't support the gutless opposition party or GOP nominee, that it will mean the end of our nation, the end of our representative Republican form of government. This sort of fear-mongering has become a staple of the right in America in election cycle after successive election cycle. We knew that it was the case that they argued that with respect to the current regime, that of Barack Hussein Obama, that he would be the death of our republic. Well, it hasn't happened. We heard it in '08 that if you didn't come forth under this tyranny of false unity and support John McCain, that it would be the death of our republic. We heard it again in 2012 that if you didn't go in with the tyranny of false unity for the then Republican nominee of Mitt Romney, then it would be the death of our modern representative republic. And of course, again, none of this is true. It doesn't take into account that the way that our government was designed, going back to its inception some 235 plus years ago, that we could overcome any hurdle, obstacle, and adversity placed in our path. There is a reason why our constitutionally endowed republic is the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running representative republic and constitution in the entire course of human events. Of course, this is not what the media focuses on. This is not what political pundits focus upon, because they want there to be this fear. They want the fear-mongering to be at the top, and they want us to all do what we want, or what they want to have happen in the country, and that is to have full control. And we just can't just allow that to continue, because it literally works against what we stand for and who we are, both as a nation and as a people. And what's amazing is we don't have to look that far back in the annals of our relatively brief yet illustrious history to see how the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist at one time understood this notion of there being an overarching good for the American people, and that they would exploit that for their own good. Because if you recall, with the Fabian Society that traces its origins back to 19th century Great Britain, their original iconography was that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. In other words, they would want to try and control the narrative and to be able to intermingle with and disperse themselves throughout polite society, thereby allowing them to infiltrate and to pervert it. But the fear-mongering that I'm speaking of goes back to the Wall Street crash of 1929. In American history, we were about to enter the Great Depression a decade before we did, in 1919. And it was under Warren Harding that we were able to go back to laissez-faire, or invisible hand economics, meaning that the free market should correct itself, and that constitutional government is the best way to resolve the problems facing the nation, that we were able to have the Roaring Twenties. But it's really not at the parlance of the way history is taught anymore. The historical revisionists are doing everything they can to essentially rewrite our history, to eradicate the notions that really helped us and allowed us to overcome the problems that we had. And it started with the president who was in power at the time that the Wall Street crash hit. Recall that after the death of Warren Harding, we had the constitutional compositionist in Calvin Coolidge, and it was under his tutelage that we wanted to have limited government, and that limited government is what helped bring us into the robust times known as the Roaring Twenties. But by the time of 1929, we had a progressive who proclaimed to be a conservative and was a businessman who considered himself an outsider and was considered an outsider by the American electorate by the name of Herbert Hoover. And he was one that said that he wouldn't take a salary as president, which is something that Donald J. Trump has mirrored in this 2016 election cycle. And he also said that he would go out of his way to try and resolve the problems that were facing us with the Wall Street crash of October of 1929. That was a very disastrous time in American history. It was something that worked against us and put us in a weak and anemic position. But what Hoover was wanting to do was to use the government to ease the pain, almost like quantitative easing, but it was different. It was the government starting to come in and control business and commerce to a degree that had been hitherto unknown in America, because it would be diametrically opposed to the constitutional framework that our founding fathers had left to us, and what had made this nation so robust for such an extended period of time. But that didn't matter, because as we have oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that in the system of American polity, these false perceptions oftentimes matter more than reality. But as Aristotle said in his Art of Rhetoric, people are more willing to accept the truth because, in a sense, we are hardwired to accept the truth. That's why you see elaborate ruses, the embracing of conspiracy theories, the pushing for uncorroborated stories to whip the electorate, or the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, into a raw emotional state of fear, petrifying fear, that they can then manipulate us and work to strip the power that rightfully belongs to us in our capacity as the true sovereigns, to then concentrate it in the hands of the government. That's what they want. That is how they wish to manipulate and control us. And it would be what they would do to try and weaken us and to pit us against each other in the hopes of weakening the nation. Why would they want to weaken the nation? Because ultimately they are the ones that are looking to fearmonger and to redefine us. In fact, that is the whole purpose of the Fabian movement. It is to incrementally infiltrate and pervert society, thereby fundamentally, drastically, irreparably, and permanently change us. And it just cannot be allowed to be. Because when you stop and think about it, we must be the ones that save this country. Only we, the people, can. And that's by the very design of our nation. But we see that there is this push for a tyranny of false unity within the modern arena of American politics, such as those that are pushing for a tyranny of false unity. They're the ones that will pressure you and apply this pressure to say, don't vote your conscience. You must vote for the lesser of two weasels in order to ensure that Madam Clinton doesn't get into office. But it's the whole notion there that they are that afraid of Hillary, and that they would allow her to basically come into office. That anyone that wouldn't support Trump is proactively helping Hillary get in. And that just doesn't make sense, does it? If you're not proactively supporting her, if you are not to go out and vote for her, you're not supporting her. It's all fear mongering. And of course, this type of fear mongering just really does tear the heart out of us because it obfuscates the truth. It drives us away from the truth, and we cannot allow that to occur because it goes against all that we hold near and dear. And why would we do that? Why would we allow that to be the new norm in America? We can't. And it's shocking that in his inaugural address of 1933, in March of 1933, that Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, the father of modern American progressivism, went forth and proclaimed that the only thing we had to fear was fear itself. That by having fear grip us, it prohibits us from acting. Now, of course, he was being intellectually disingenuous when he said that, because he didn't really believe that himself. He just thought that this was a good approach to try and bamboozle the people. He was the one that whipped up the flames of fear during the 1932 election, saying that the Republican had caused the Great Depression. And in fact, he had supported Hoover during his first election in 1929 because he was trying to get away from constitutional compositionism. We had had two successive progressive presidents that were abject failures, that of Teddy Roosevelt and then that of Woodrow Wilson, who exponentially increased the power of government, particularly under Wilson when he was calling it wartime socialism. All of this painted in a pretty picture, wrapped up in pretty wrapping paper to try and convince us that it was for the benefit of the American people, that they were acting in our best interest, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. This is the sort of intellectually disingenuous drivel that has been a part of American politics for well over a century now, folks. And FDR seized upon it. He allowed himself to come in and essentially placate the fears and lull the American electorate into a false sense of security. But what it also shows is that during that time, in the Great Depression, even the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists realized they had to approach this with this idea of an overarching picture of a greater good for America and her people. That there had to be this notion that the United States of America as a nation and as a people was greater than the sum of its parts. In other words, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts is what is what America is. That's part of what our natural law tenets are. And this is what Roosevelt wanted to manipulate in order to try and bamboozle the American people, to convince them that he would do good things for the nation, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. Now, I actually have a video clip of that speech that he delivered back in March of 1993, and I'm going to go ahead and key that up now because I think it's so important that we have an understanding of what he was trying to do and what he was wanting to basically bring about in the United States that didn't work to the benefit of everyone. And of course, it's important that we hear this because I'm going to tie it back into the problems that we are currently facing right now. So here we go.
This is a day of national consecration. And I am certain that on this day, my fellow Americans expect that on my induction into the presidency, I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impels. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. We face our common difficulties. They concern, thank God, only material things. The withered leaves of industrial enterprise lie on every side. Farmers find no market for their produce, and the savings of many years in thousands of families are gone. More important, a host of unemployed citizens face the grim problem of existence, and an equally great number toil with little return. Only a foolish optimist can deny the dark realities of the moment. And yet we are stricken by no plague of locusts. Compared with the perils which our forefathers conquered, we have still much to be thankful for. Nature still offers her bounty, and human efforts have multiplied it. Plenty is at our doorstep.
You heard it right there. Plenty is at our doorstep. We have a lot to be thankful for, that we have overcome these great hurdles and obstacles, and that we can overcome any problem that we face. And you could tell that there was that push back then, even by FDR, to essentially have it to where the American people were basically this greater impetus, this greater focus. Now, he didn't mean it, because the New Deal was a disaster for the country. It exponentially expanded the power, scope, and application of government well beyond its actual constitutional design, and that is partly what led to the deepening of the Depression during his 3 terms in office. But folks, we see that he talks about there being a way to get around fear. Now, his solution for that was socialism, and I cannot disagree with that more emphatically than I am and have. And recall that it was his New Deal that Bernie Sanders had used to define his definition of democratic socialism. We had even done a solo flight special in the past where I dedicated it to covering Sanders defining the New Deal as democratic socialism. And folks, here's part of the problem. If that is what works, if that was really so great and wonderful, why, to quote Bernie Sanders, do we need a New Deal? A new Deal? We don't. We need to eradicate those things that chain and shackle the American people. We need to get back to basics, and as we have reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, basics in the United States of America is composed and found within the clear and concise language of our shared United States Constitution. That really is what it comes down to. Those are just the facts, and that is how we will overcome the problems that we face. You see, with the torrent of illegal aliens, we already have laws in place by the legislature, which is the only branch of government pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, that has the power and the wherewithal, as well as the authority, to enact immigration and naturalization laws. We have an executive branch which has the power to enforce that, that's refusing to enforce it. Then we see that Trump comes out during this alleged Gettysburg address of his that I will discuss in further detail in the next segment, in which Trump said that he would instantly solve all of these problems with the snap of a finger. For instance, one of the things he said was that he would implement basically these term limitations on Congress. Unfortunately, he can't do that. By the Constitution, he cannot. The only way that he could do that would be through an executive order, and that would be a continuation of the illegitimate, rogue, and tyrannical abuse of the executive authority of the office of President of the United States. So right off the bat, he's already going out there and showing that he would operate outside the proper scope and application of government as established by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. This sort of fear and fear-mongering and this sort of totalitarian authoritarianism is not conservative. It has no place within the reins of political power. It has no place in a free, open, and honest society like that of the United States of America. Unfortunately, this has become the new status quo with respect to our system of polity. We have politicians who no longer respect the Constitution, and to my mind, that is what keeps things in jeopardy. That is what keeps us in this state of perpetual fear. But as Roosevelt had said, we must be able to overcome our fears. We must not allow ourselves to be petrified by fear. And the way that we overcome that is that we embrace our proper role and scope and duties and obligations, but above all responsibilities, in our true capacity as the ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. But again, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media are not going to convey that message. They don't want that to be the narrative that is heard in these United States of America, because again, it goes against their propagandistic Fabian socialist agenda and narrative. And we should not allow ourselves to get down this path any further, because it is that problem that is eking out an election cycle after election cycle. This is how the charlatans are able to come forth and bamboozle us. And we are greater than this. We are a more robust people than this. We are a free people, and we should not allow these charlatans and hucksters to dictate how things operate in the United States or how our party is supposed to work. And that's part of the problem. We've allowed it to become a cult of personality, and that in and of itself is dangerous. It is a dangerous situation because it doesn't allow us to be who we are. It really is diametrically opposed and to all that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And that's tragic. It's tragic because it shows that the political elites in this country, the current political powers that be, are operating in such a form and fashion as to be diametrically opposed to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And that's part of the fear. FDR encouraged that kind of fear, but he paid lip service to not encouraging that kind of fear. Donald Trump encourages that kind of fear, but rather blunderingly attempts to pay lip service to not encouraging that sort of fear. This irrational fear of Hillary Clinton is beyond the pale for me, because it doesn't make sense that we would abandon all that we stand for, the principles that have allowed our nation to be a free and open and honest society with the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutional document in all of world history. And that is something that should matter with us. Why do we ignore that? Why do we allow penultimate concerns to be the things that grip our hearts, souls, and minds, both as a nation and as a people? We can ill afford that. We simply cannot allow our nation to continue down this destructive path because truly, ultimately, and without a shadow of a doubt, that is going to work to harm us each and every time. It is dangerous. It is foolhardy. It is foolish beyond all comparison because it takes us away from what matters. So again, this is why my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have so oft times warned and reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that it is dangerous to allow ourselves to be wrapped up in this emotional frenzy, to be put or placed in such a state of raw emotionalism that we shut down our mental faculties and capabilities and quit reasoning and just emote. It means that a charlatan, a huckster, a carnival barker, a con artist, and a snake oil salesman like Donald Trump was able to secure the nomination of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. Well, folks, we just cannot afford that. We can ill afford that because it goes against all that we hold near and dear. It also places us in a much more difficult position to find out what really matters. And again, that is why we stress that it is so important for us all to foster the fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Because in so doing, then we empower ourselves to act in the proper scope of duty and obligation that we are required to as the popular sovereigns of the United States. And again, it traces itself back to that beautiful and poetic language that's found in the opening lines of the preamble of our shared United States Constitution, that we, the people, are the ones that created this nation, that we were seeking to create a more perfect union. Not a perfect union as some of the alt-right who are pushing for this fear-mongering, people like Edmund Kozak over there at Laura Inkampf's LifeZets page, who said that we mistake it for perfection and that we are blindly worshiping something that is a mere piece of paper. That sort of chicanery is stupid. It is stupid beyond all words, and it shows that fear-mongering is what they push. Tribalism mixed with fear-mongering, which ultimately creates barbarism. Folks, there is no more apt way to discuss that, or to define that, or to tell it as it is, than to call it barbarism. And that is something that should not be tolerated in these United States of America. That is not who we are, either as a nation and as a people. And that is why it is so important that we do look at our history, not this adulterated version that has been pushed by the Fabian socialists and their allies and the historical revisionists and the standard bearers for Common Core education. No, our true history. The history that literally defines us, the history that has allowed us to be a free and robust nation and people. But that requires us to be proactive. That requires us to pay attention to those things that are ultimately working against us. Now, I know it is far easier said than done to actually stand up for and represent the things that we are as a nation and as a people, but we must. Because we are the only ones that can. And we will. Because we have overcome every hurdle, obstacle, and adversity that has been placed in our path throughout our history, and we have done so in stunning fashion. No other people have been endowed with such a great birthright as we, the American people. That is why our Constitution is the greatest social compact or social contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. Again, as Roosevelt tried to manipulate it, but as we can really prove it, the United States of America is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and we should not allow fear to roll over our conscience, to run over our conscience. Our vote must be earned. It is something that is a political currency. And when none of the current crop of candidates represents who we are or what we stand for as a nation and as a people, then they have not earned our vote. There is no way to sugarcoat that. There's no way to candy coat that. Now, while William Burke said that all it takes for evil to triumph is for men of good conscience to do nothing, it's also important to recall that you do not serve your conscience by voting for evil, even if it is supposedly a lesser of two evils. Unfortunately, what we have here is not a lesser of two evils. But again, we aren't going to tell you how to exercise your right to vote. Only you can do that. And don't allow anyone else to push you into a tyranny of false unity. Now, one of the things that Trump had mentioned during this Gettysburg speech that he gave at that rally was that he would end government corruption, and that government corruption is a major catastrophe that has been really hampering the American people. And the problem I have with this is it is a very, very intellectually disingenuous thing for him to say. And of course, he's still doubling down on this whole thing of division and divisiveness. But he said that he would basically end all of the corruption, that he would push for essentially having term limits and what have you. And he can't do that without Congress. That is not the way our system works. And in fact, I've got little pieces of it. I've just got to get to it, to where he said these things, and it really is kind of foolish of what he was doing, because again, it shows that he lacks this knowledge of how the United States of America works, how our Constitution works, and who we are as a nation and as a people. And that's part of the problem. It's just really beyond the pale. Unfortunately, it can't be allowed to continue. So here's what he said. He would push for a constitutional amendment for term limits for members of Congress. How would he do that? Article 5 of the Constitution clearly lays out how that's to be done, and I don't think that he's going to get enough for it. He would have a hiring freeze on all federal employees to reduce the federal workforce through attrition, exempting military, public safety, and public health. So what? Then we'll see that what they do is they'll just redefine everything as to fit those things. He would have a permanent ban on members of the executive administration from ever becoming political lobbyists. How? Again, that is something that you would need to have a constitutional amendment to do. He would then apply eliminating 2 federal regulations for every one passed. Again, you'd need Congress to do that. He then said he would repeal the Obamacare disaster and replace it to provide relief to American families. No, we don't need to replace something that is an unconstitutional bill. That really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then he said that he would impose tough tariffs on foreign imports to keep American companies from moving overseas. So in other words, he's going to punish American companies instead of removing the draconian regulations and overzealous tax system that has pushed them overseas. Things like unions. I've never once heard him mention that he would go after unions. So again, he is not really being open and honest. He's being intellectually disingenuous. Then he said, immediately open up energy production to jumpstart our economy. Okay, maybe. Appoint judges who strictly uphold the Constitution, yet we know that he said that he would push for his anti-constitutional, frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist sister to the Supreme Court, said she'd be a great, fantastic Supreme Court justice. And then he would immediately begin renegotiating NAFTA to make it a better deal. How? Again, he says he'd do all of this, but he just doesn't really explain how. And that has been one of the shortcomings with him. And it really is something that we have to take into account, something that we have to get back into a sense of reality if we ever hope to place this nation back onto the path to prosperity. Now, what Trump has done there is offered all of these things and put it as me, I, showing that he has no restraint. But what we need in this country is a person of poise, a person of great personal restraint, particularly when you consider that the highest office in the land has been stretched far beyond what it was ever originally intended to be, or to the powers that were explicitly and expressly enumerated unto it by Article 2 of the Constitution, which defines, establishes, and creates the office of President of the United States, and indeed the entire executive branch of government. Basically, most of what he was saying there would take executive orders in the way that he was putting it, or it would require something that he doesn't have the support for, which would be an Article 5 convention. It would require 3/4 of the states to vote for it to pass it. So again, it's a bunch of populist tripe. It's a bunch of meaningless, shallow, hollow, and empty platitudes that will have no bearing on proper governance. And still, he doesn't rectify the atrocious notion that he, through his daughter Ivanka, is pushing for increased federally mandated minimum wage, that there would be mandatory paternity and maternity leave. All of this sort of thing would kill business. And yet I thought one of the things that the Lion Branch Trumpvidians congregating over there in their Trumpvidian tabernacle professed, going all the way back to the heated and contentious primary process of this disastrous 2016 election cycle, was that he was a good businessman. He was a goodly businessman that can do great things with his smally hands and build things perfect here forever. But it doesn't work. It's not connected to reality. It has no application to the proper scope and application of government as mandated, defined, and laid out in the clear and concise language of our shared United States Constitution. And that's the problem. You see, a lot of the Never Trump folks are upset with Trump, not because their candidate didn't win, but because he has not espoused anything that is in line with the Constitution. And that exacerbates the problems that we are facing both as a nation and as a people. And in fact, that's been the consistent message that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been conveying going back to our premiere episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015. That the further we distance and divorce ourselves from the strictures contained within the Constitution, that is when you continue to see the death spiral that afflicts the United States increase exponentially. And that's really the problem we have. The conservative movement does not have a voice in this election cycle, and I believe that that is a great tragedy. We are fast approaching a third consecutive loss for the presidency. Again, because the GOP doesn't stand for anything, and therefore they go out and they embrace a con man who, for the vast majority of his 70 years spent on God's green earth, has espoused these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist, leftist, and progressive positions. And we cannot afford that, because it is diametrically opposed to what this nation was designed to be. You see, again, it requires that we here in these United States of America go back to basics, and basics are found within the Constitution. But again, we haven't seen this espoused by any of the candidates really vying for office. Sure, the closest, I guess, would be either Evan McMullin or the Constitution Party's candidate, Darrell Castle, but they have their own shortcomings that come to mind. And that, again, is why we say, we don't tell you how to exercise your fundamental and inalienable God-given right to vote. Only you can do that. That is why voting your conscience is an intrinsic and inherent part of what it is to be an American citizen. But we saw that that got booed there on the convention floor in Cleveland, Ohio during this last summer, when Ted Cruz got up in front of the crowd there and said to vote your conscience. They then applied all sorts of peer pressure, all sorts of electoral pressure on him to get him to cave. This is what a tyranny of false unity gives us. And this is what happens each and every time that we bow down to these charlatans and that we sell out our principles and convictions. That's not good for America. That is not who we are, either as a nation or as a people. But I do want to bring up this speech that Trump gave there at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and then we will discuss it further in detail after I go ahead and present this to you. But I think it's important that we get to that and that we show this, because it shows, again, just how out of touch with reality Donald Trump really is. And it's dangerous. We should not be forced to face these sorts of dangers, because these dangers literally work to harm us each and every time. So here we go.
We will. The corruption is massive. We will drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. and replace it with a new government of, by, and for the people. Believe me. That is why I have chosen Gettysburg to unveil this contract. I'm asking the American people to rise above the noise and the clutter of our broken politics and to embrace that great faith and optimism that has always been the central ingredient in the American character. And there is nothing better or stronger than the American character.
I wish that I could believe that. I wish that that were the case. But he's talking about using the Gettysburg Address. That was where Lincoln, whom we've covered in previous episodes, was a tyrant and had acted in a way that was outside of Congress. Recall that he too wanted to arrest Supreme Court justices or any type of justice or judge who disagreed with him, thereby allowing him to basically increase his power and to maintain his power at the expense of we the people. And again, none of that works in our best interest. It shows that he really is an authoritarian, and that is why he chose that platform. That is the message he thinks that we, as a nation and as a people, are far too stupid to understand. He thinks that we can't comprehend it. He thinks that we are so caught up in the facets of our daily lives that we cannot cut through the fluff. But folks, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are going to cut through that fluff. We are going to show you everything that we have been in order to empower you so that you can foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. What Trump was doing there was not speaking to limiting the power of government. No, because if you recall, during that town hall that he had during the primary process with Jake Tapper at CNN, when asked what the three most important duties, obligations, and above all responsibilities of the federal government were, Trump went forth and boldly proclaimed housing, education, and healthcare. But when you look in the clear confines and the clear and concise language of the Constitution, you will not find that mentioned anywhere. It's because it is not what this nation is about. It is not what our government is supposed to do. Our founding fathers would be abhorred to see that that was what they're pushing for now, and that someone who claims to be a conservative would be pushing such an irresponsible position. But that is literally where we find ourselves as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you. And it's shocking that we are there. it's shocking that we are in a very dangerous and precarious position. And again, it is because so many people have just bought into the chicanery. They have allowed themselves to be whipped up into this raw emotional state of petrifying fear, which ultimately draws them away from the things that matter, that pulls them away from what it takes to literally place this nation back onto the path to prosperity. Again, that is something that only we, the people, can do in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. But that is a message that is lost. But I do want to, again, go back to that speech and play just a little bit more so that we can discuss a little bit more with respect to it, because what it is showing is, again, just that he is so divorced from those things that matter. And unless and until we are willing to take the steps that are necessary to place this nation back onto the path of prosperity, which means not turning to political strongmen, not turning to people that claim they and they alone can fix it. It means we do it. But when you listen to this speech from Trump again, it's not there. That's not what he's saying. That's not what he's doing. It's not what he's advocating for. So let me go ahead and cue that up, and then we will discuss it further.
I am asking the American people to dream big once again. What follows is my 100-day action plan to make America great again. It's a contract between Donald J. Trump and the American voter, and it begins with bringing honesty, accountability, and change to Washington, D.C. Therefore, on the first day of my term of office, my administration will immediately pursue the following 6 measures to clean up the corruption and special interest collusion in Washington. First, a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on all members of Congress. Second, a hiring freeze on all federal employees to reduce federal workforce through attrition, exempting military, public safety, and public health. Third, a requirement that for every new federal regulation, 2 existing regulations must be eliminated. Regulations are killing our country and our jobs. Fourth, a 5-year ban on White House and congressional officials becoming lobbyists after they leave government service, making a fortune. Fifth, a lifetime ban on White House officials lobbying on behalf of a foreign government. Very bad. 6, a complete ban on foreign lobbyists raising money for American elections. That's what's happening.
Really? How is he going to do that? Well, let's actually discuss the one that I think is the most intellectually disingenuous of the ones that he was saying there, the ones that were just beyond the pale with belief, particularly when you speak of the Constitution of the United States. And the way that I'm going to do that is we'll look at the clear and concise language contained within Article 5, because that is the only way that we can amend the Constitution. And of course, that's something that he's not mentioning, something that he doesn't even know to mention. Here's what Article 5 says. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which shall be made prior to the year 1880, or 1808 rather, shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that it's the House that can bring it up, or the states, not the president. And what that last part meant was that it couldn't violate an ex post facto law or a bill of attainder. But you see, these are not what Trump mentions, because again, that is restraint, and Trump does not believe in restraint. Trump is about doubling down on his power, exponentially increasing the power or expanding the power of the federal government, which is the last thing that we need, particularly when you consider that the United States of America is in the grips of an identity crisis, in conjunction with a slew of constitutional crises that have been exceedingly exacerbated by these disastrous twin terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. Again, folks, this is fear, petrified fear, going forth like a plague. And I don't want to insult plagues, because plagues can be very powerful, but the plague of dandruff coming from the mafioso Coafioso is not working in our best interests. Again, it's a way for him to try and obfuscate and deflect and try and go out and besmirch and belittle those who have brought complaints against him. As it is, there has been an 11th woman who's come forth and said that she was sexually assaulted by Trump. And Trump said that he will sue these people. During that same speech, he said that he would sue these people. That's not going to play out well. In fact, that once again is blundering into this erroneous, specious, and sarcastic narrative of the Clinton camp in saying that there is this laughable Republican war on women, that Donald Trump personifies all of these brash, two-dimensional stereotypes and caricatures that the left attempts to pigeonhole the right with in this country. Folks, these are not things that we can just ignore. These are the sorts of things that ultimately create problems for us down the road. And unfortunately, this is playing out exactly as my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I warned that it would on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. I think also that this is a sign of desperation on the part of Trump, that he's trying to sound reasonable because he's tanking in the polls. It's too little, too late. He was never really in it to win it, folks. This was all part of his grand scheme to try and fundamentally redefine us, both as a nation and as a people. And it was to help his good buddy, Hillary Rotten Clinton. But we know better than that. And here's the other thing. He's talking about a new contract with America. Well, guess what? In contract law, there's something known as an attestation clause, which states that essentially all that is written in the contract is the complete and finalized version, except for the language that allows for amendments through the proper process, and therefore any future contract will not be binding, as this contract is the controlling one. Well, Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution, the Supremacy Clause, is an attestation clause. It states that the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. Therefore, any contract that Donald Trump is trying to bring forth to the American people or try to have put in as settled law is void ab initio, meaning that it is lacking of all binding force of law from the outset. Of course, that's not the way that the media is going to cover it. That's not what those who are clamoring and yammering for a tyranny of false unity will convey, because, again, it shows that they are literally pushing for this tyranny of false unity, and they will do anything to try and make Trump look like a reasonable candidate when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. This is why he is so dangerous. It is why we say we must be wary of him, and it's why we say reject these voices of a tyranny of false unity and vote your conscience however your conscience tells you. If it tells you to vote for Trump, more power to you. But if it doesn't, don't let these people gang up on you. Don't let them use fear-mongering tactics to redefine us or to force you to act in a way that is against your best interests. Only you have the right to determine how your vote is earned. And that's the thing. That's the thing that is not being discussed. A vote is not freely given, nor should it ever be. It is your right. It is something that belongs to you and must be earned. And if he is such a great businessman and such a big and wonderful negotiator, then Trump should be able to win your vote, no holds barred. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing the same usual fluff, the same usual tried and true, albeit threadbare tactic and strategy of a tyranny of false unity. But that's not who we are as a nation or as a people. And I think that one of the legacies that is going to become part of the history of this disastrous 2016 presidential election cycle is the fact that this is the election cycle where we totally disregard the notion of conscience. This is the election cycle where the Republican National Convention booed being able to go out and vote your conscience, to be an individual. And therefore, this is the election cycle where groupthink is becoming the new and established norm in these United States of America. We cannot and must not ever allow that to become an established norm in this country, because it is diametrically opposed to those natural law tenets which by their own very nature are timeless and immutable, meaning they're just as applicable today as they were at the inception of this nation some 235 years ago, as God willing they will be some 235 years from today, to be wiped from the face of this earth. And again, it's so telling that he chose Gettysburg to facetiously place this so-called renewed contract with America out there. But the man is consistently inconsistent. He has not once embraced a consistent volley of policy positions. He has not expanded upon how it would be in line with the Constitution, and therefore it's not something that I believe we should trust. We know that for the vast majority of his 70 years spent on God's green earth, he has been a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist, leftist, and progressive. None of those things coalesce with or line up with the Constitution. Again, folks, it is why we have reiterated almost to the point of ad nauseum on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that the only litmus test that matters when you are attempting to determine who is best qualified to wield the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours is the Constitution. That is the end-all be-all. It is all that matters. It is the only thing that should apply. So all of those things that Trump listed would be violative of the Constitution. It would be violative of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Yet this is not being discussed. The Republican Party doesn't want to discuss it because the Republican Party no longer stands for anything. And when you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. And what a tragic state of affairs that literally is for this party, for our nation, for our system of polity. But again, folks, the ones who are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, the ones who can save this nation, are we the people. That is what matters. That is what our founding fathers expected. But in order to do that, to truly stand up and advocate that position, we must be proactive in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. No one else can do that. No one else has the power, the authority, or the wherewithal to do it. And again, that is the message that should be at the heart of everything that we do, both as a nation and as a people, because that is the only way that we can place this nation back onto the path to prosperity. I wish that more people would discuss it in point of fact like that. I wish that our pundits and our commensurate here on the right, for a vast majority of them, had not abandoned their conservative principles and convictions. I wish they had not sought political expediency at the expense of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. But we will continue to be the voice of liberty. We will continue to resist any and all efforts to strip and deprive us of our Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights by either side of the political aisle. That is the promise that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, make unto you, and we shall not waver from it, folks. We will never betray you. Now, one of the things that we see is that Frank Luntz, that pollster that oftentimes appears on the Fox News channel, has come forth and said that this election cycle should have been an easy one for the gutless opposition party, or GOP, to win. And that is something that we have said on numerous previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. It's just one of those things that you simply cannot ignore because it is the truth. And I think it's so fascinating that he said this, particularly when you consider all of the tripe that has been going on with respect to this election cycle ever since Trump has clinched the nomination. We said that all of the skeletons that were in Trump's bigly walk-in closet would constitute a cemetery, something he could not escape, something that would ultimately come back to haunt him and, by extension, the Republican Party. Now, there have been several senators that have disavowed or denounced Trump, and there were at least 4, and 2 of them are doing well. And it just goes to show that Trump is not the best person to try and run against Hillary Rotten Clinton, that he doesn't have the political wherewithal or the political capital that is necessary to ensure that we could have the stunning victory that we ought to have had very easily against Hillary, who is the least popular candidate that the Democrat Party has foisted upon its constituents and the American people in the last half century. These are the sorts of things that really should come to the surface, should come to the forefront, should be open and obvious to anyone who is looking at this in any form of an objective fashion. But unfortunately, intellectual genuineness has been swept by the wayside. And of course, that plays directly into this narrative that has been foisted upon us by the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, when they said that this was the election cycle in which we would discard with conventional wisdom. Well, in a way they're right, but they're giddy about that because it means, once again, that our time-honored values, institutions, and traditions are basically under the scalpel, being excised from the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Except that I would consider this medical malpractice because Donald Trump doesn't even have the license to do it. He doesn't have the qualifications to do it. I doubt he'd even wear a surgical cap over that badly hair of his. But I think it's important that we actually go to this little piece that had Frank Luntz there on ABC. And I'm going to go ahead and cue that clip up so that we can begin to discuss it in further detail, because I think it's just that important. I think that we need to get a better sense of what is literally happening in this country. And again, we know that the Fox News channel had been one that had done all of this and had been pushing for Trump from the get-go, and I don't think we can ignore that. But here, I'm going to go ahead and cue this up.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We continue with Republican strategist and CBS consultant Frank Luntz. Frank, you mentioned change, and that was the message that would bring Republicans together. Donald Trump has been talking about what he'll do in his first 100 days. He's been talking about draining the swamp in Washington. Is that what that's all about?
Well, it should have happened weeks or even months ago. I don't understand why he waited this long. And in fact, when you've got 70 million people watching the debates, that's when he should have released his plan for the first 100 days. What Republicans should look at, because there's going to be a lot of recrimination when this election is over, is that the focal point was not on those forgotten Americans that Donald Trump talked about a year ago as he began his candidacy. It's that it's all focused on him, his battles with the women, his battles with the media, his battles with just about everybody. If he had stayed the voice and the vision for those people who've been left behind, this race would be a lot different than it is right now.
You say recriminations. Do you think it's over? You think he's going to lose?
No, I don't think it's over, because if you look at the polling numbers across the country and in those key states, there are enough people that are still undecided. Hillary Clinton in almost every poll is below 50%. I don't think she's going to get a majority on election day, but it requires a level of discipline that the Trump campaign has not had. This is about the voice of the voters, not the voice of Donald Trump.
Is it the campaign or is it the candidate, you think, where the signal is getting lost?
I think it's both. And in the testing that we do, Donald Trump scores really well when he talks about changing the budget and holding people accountable. But he scores really badly when he starts attacking Hillary Clinton on personal terms, or even goes as far back as Bill Clinton. John, I have never seen a campaign that has less discipline, less focus, less of an effective vision at a time when more Americans are demanding a change in the way their government works. This should have been slam dunk for the GOP.
All right, Frank Luntz, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Folks, I don't think you can be any more clear than what Frank Luntz was saying there. And granted, there's been a lot of times that we haven't agreed with him. We know, for instance, that he had pushed for Marco Rubio during the primary process, and none of that really works to the best interests of the American people. But what it does speak volumes to here is that Trump is not really in this to win it, that Trump is not doing the sorts of things that we would expect from a candidate who is vying for the highest office in the land. And that lack of discipline just speaks about something that goes all the way back to his childhood. We know that he was sent to a military prep school because he had a discipline problem back then. He has a discipline problem now, and literally that is what is going to haunt the gutless opposition party, or GOP, all throughout this disastrous election cycle. And unless and until we begin to come to terms with this, and we begin to realize that Hillary Clinton and the various other Democrats are going to be able to lock us into the stereotype that they've been pushing, these problems are going to continue. In fact, this is arguably, and I think proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, what happens when you keep buying into this false notion of voting for the lesser of two evils. It comes back to bite us each and every time, and we should have learned our lesson by now. But the fact of the matter is we have not. We have failed to learn from the mistakes of the past, and therefore we are doomed to repeat history, as that old adage goes. And unfortunately, Trump is incapable of delving into policies. And it's because he has failed to demonstrate a working knowledge of that. Recall that during the primary process, he didn't know what the nuclear triad was. That's our nuclear defense system that is three-pronged. We have the intercontinental ballistic missiles. We have our Air Force with the B-52s that can deliver a nuclear payload. And then we have our nuclear subs, our boomer subs, that can launch their payload from nearly anywhere on Earth. Trump didn't know what that was. He didn't know what it was. He didn't know what the most important aspect of that was. And then there were reports earlier during this election cycle that he had asked Department of Defense personnel as to why we just couldn't nuke nations. Folks, that coinciding with his encouragement for our armed forces to commit war crimes by going after those who have not been explicitly shown to be engaging in acts of war against the United States, that is basically pushing us towards the pale of barbarism. Now, that's not political correctness. That's not moral relativism. That is a question that must be posed to us directly. Do we want to be a nation that stands for no law? Because if you recall what the old adage about the United States of America has always been, that we are a nation of laws and not of men, it means that we have to respect the law. It means that we have to find intrinsic and inherent value in the law and apply it equally across the board. And we have so far distanced and divorced ourselves. And yes, Hillary Clinton is a major part of that problem, but she is not the only aspect of that problem or element of that problem that exists. She is but a mere piece of that problem. Trump is part of that problem too. And again, it's because they both fall into this category of believing that they are above or separate and apart from the supreme law of the land and from having our laws apply to them. And again, when you think about what it was that our founding fathers were fighting against in that long, drawn-out, bloody affair known as the American War of Independence, you must come to one inexorable conclusion. And that conclusion is this, that we must have the laws apply equally across the board. It cannot be selectively enforced. It cannot be selectively pushed, just as our Bill of Rights cannot be selectively pushed and enforced. And think back to the way that Trump was agreeing with the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists when they congregated there on the House and Senate chambers to sit down and protest the fundamental and inalienable God-given right of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty to keep and bear firearms by saying that if you are on that no-fly, no-buy list, we will cry, particularly if you mention due process. Well, Trump said that he agrees with that. But here's the problem. It involves a constitutional right. And the due process clause of the 14th and of the 5th Amendment say that you cannot impede those rights without notice and a hearing. So that means that without notice and a hearing, because it's all secretive, because it's all for national security, as they proclaim, that you can be placed on this list, and in other words, your fundamental and inalienable right to purchase and keep and bear firearms can be abridged. That is wholly violative of the Constitution. It goes against all that we stand for, both as a nation and as a people, and this is something that conservatives should never support. But we see that Donald Trump is willing to support that. We see that Donald Trump is continuing to double down on the same lines and rhetoric that he used before he officially threw his hat into the ring back in July of 2015, when he said that he found no intrinsic or inherent value in the Constitution and therefore has never read it from cover to cover. Now, how can he be entrusted with the reins of political power when on his inaugural day, on Inauguration Day, he will be called upon to swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution to the best of his ability? Well, by his own admission, he would have no ability to do so because he has not once read the Constitution. He hasn't found value in it. That is enough, in my mind, to render him incompetent and disqualified for being the next commander-in-chief or chief executive of these United States of America. But so many people are wrapped up in this cult of personality. They think that he can magnanimously, with his smally hands, magically work to piece this nation back together. But again, recall what we have said on innumerous previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that we need to stop looking for messianic figures to come down out of the heavens and save us. That by the very design of this nation, the only ones who are endowed with the proper authority, power, and wherewithal to save this nation is we the people. We have to be wary of tyranny. Tyranny is a danger, and it is always lurking around the corner. Recall that one of the things that Reagan had said is that liberty and freedom is always just one generation away from extinction. Why is that? It is because those nefarious forces that are hell-bent on the complete and utter annihilation of our liberties and of our nation, they never rest. They are meticulous. They are patient. They continue to work towards their goal at every waking moment and opportunity. It's like what Kat Sunstein, that frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist activist, said, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, what was he speaking to? He was speaking to using every available opportunity to try and strip and deprive the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of their rightful and legitimate power and authority. That is the major disconnect that we see, particularly with respect to Donald J. Trump. He's not standing up for the Constitution. He's not advocating for the Constitution. He was at that Gettysburg Address, sort of, but again, he was proclaiming these things like some king or emperor trying to give an edict to his subjects. But we in the United States of America are not subjects. We are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. And it is high past time that we fully recognize that and become cognizant and fully aware of that again. Because as long as we allow there to be any sort of person vying for the highest office in the land, whether it be Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, who think that they can act in such an unabashed way, that they can operate outside the proper scope and application of government as established, outlined, and yes, even mandated by the Constitution, then we have the problem of tyranny coming in. And I'm reminded of what a dear friend of mine said. She said that, if you don't vote for Trump, you're fulfilling Burke's quote, that famous quote that I mentioned in one of the previous segments, about all it takes for evil to triumph is for men of good conscience to do nothing. Wrong. It's not that what Burke was saying is incorrect. It's that the way she was applying it is incorrect. Men of good conscience must weigh it on their conscience, and abstaining or choosing not to vote for one of the mainstay political candidates, or any candidate for that matter, is part of your fundamental and inalienable right to vote. It is a vote to say, look, you are not representing me, and therefore it's not that I'm not doing anything. It is I am taking the proactive step of saying you don't represent me. You are not working to proactively represent my values, my traditions, my beliefs. And again, it's why it's such a misnomer to claim that the United States of America is a democracy. America has never been, and God willing, will never be, a direct democracy, because a direct democracy only recognizes the sovereignty of the majority. That allows for the creation of a tyranny of the majority, and when they try and create special, disparate, and discrete minorities, it allows a creation of a tyranny of the minority. Whereas a representative republic, that which our United States of America is, recognizes and goes out to protect and defend and to advance and advocate for the rights of the sovereign individual. Again, you cannot have a robust and powerful nation. You cannot have a free nation when you disregard individualism. In fact, rugged individualism is an explicit part of who we are as a nation. It is what helped propel us to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history here on God's green earth. These things are what rest at the heart of who we are as a nation and as a people. And unfortunately, it has been ignored by the political powers that be, by the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and certainly by the detente wing or establishment wing of the Republican Party. And because of that, conservatism has been stripped of its voice in this election cycle. We have been deprived of an avenue for which we can petition the government for a redress of grievances, and therefore it is operating in a way that is violative of the First Amendment. Because if you recall that one of the quintessential aspects of the First Amendment is that the people are allowed to congregate and to petition their government for a redress of grievances. So when we forget that, and when we ignore that, and we allow these penultimate concerns and this cult of personality to become the new age form of political norm in the United States, we are essentially selling out those great and long-standing values and traditions that are an intrinsic part of who we are. And we can ill afford to do so. We can ill afford to do so because our national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity has been relentlessly, meticulously, and unrelentingly assaulted for well over a half century now. This is what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have been working so tirelessly towards for the past century and a half now, folks. And they believe they see a light at the end of the tunnel. They believe they see the opportunity to redefine us as a nation and as a people. But we cannot allow that to come to fruition because it does not represent who we are or what we value, either as a nation or as a people. And unfortunately, what we see with Trump is that he goes out and lacks discipline, as Luntz was saying in that video clip that I played earlier in this segment, to put forth a cohesive and coherent message. He lacks the discipline to represent the American people, all of the American people. And I think that that really does work to our great detriment, that it does not represent us. It does not provide us with an avenue in which we can stand up for our rights and that we can preserve our liberties as only we, the people, can. And again, it goes back to this notion that we are lacking any understanding of how we work as a nation and as a people. Our founding fathers expected us to hand our constitutional system down to posterity, meaning until kingdom come, that it is supposed to last as long as life on earth does. And that's part of this notion of our whole entire system being based on the natural law tenets. And those natural law tenets are immutable. They're just as applicable today as they were 235 years ago, as God willing, they will be 235 years from today. And why do I repeat that so incessantly and so frequently? It's because we see that those who currently wield the reins of political power, those current political powers that be, do not believe it. They believe that they are separate, distinct, and a whole class unto themselves away from us, and that we don't matter except for a vote. And therefore we can be lied to, we can be bamboozled, we can be cajoled, we can be forced through the power of duress into a tyranny of false unity to achieve their political goals, ends, and gains, and aims as well. And what makes Trump's position so laughable is that he sat there and talked about the corruption in government, but he is the one, through his donations, such as over $100,000 to the Clinton Foundation, that has enabled and empowered these sorts of corruptions to exist within the confines of our government. He has been the prognosticator of these things. That is something, again, that his followers don't want to admit. They don't want to admit it because it would mean that they would be violating what Aristotle said in his Art of Rhetoric, that people will most often and most easily accept the truth. That's why you see obfuscation, red herrings, all of these conspiracy theories, because they know deep down that the truth, which ultimately has a way of coming through and shining its light on all of us, and as Scripture says, setting us free, will come to light, and it will expose their fearless leader for the fraud that he is. Now, as we have reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, Trump hasn't been doing this for us. Sure, he'll go out and pay lip service to that and proclaim that that's what he's doing, but no, he's doing this to create a new media empire for himself. It's why he wants that stabbed in the back theory, just like what Hitler used to launch himself into power, to become the common parlance of conservatives after this election plays out the way we think it will. I don't see him winning. I think he's made far too many mistakes. I think he has too much of this baggage and lack of discipline to literally win this thing. And you notice the hesitation with Luntz when he was asked whether he thought it was over. He almost wanted to say yes, because, folks, I think the writing is on the wall. I think that there is no doubt, no question, that Trump has literally shot himself in the face. And so maybe people will still vote for him. He did go out and proclaim that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and wouldn't lose a single voter, but I don't think he realized that it would be that he was shooting himself. We cannot, must not, and will not accept that as the new norm in the American system of polity, because that denigrates and degrades our role, our duty and obligation, but above all, our responsibility in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. I know it is not easy to accept that these things have played out the way they have, but we have to understand where it comes from. And it comes from, first of all, the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, refusing to stand for anything, refusing to be the voice for the constituents they claim to represent, and that allows a charlatan and huckster like Trump to waltz in and seize the reins of political power and pull it back unto himself, and thereby destroy our reputation, everything that we have worked so hard and so diligently to build in order to enrich himself. That's exactly what he does in every Ponzi scheme that he has ever orchestrated in the private sector of business. You know, it reminds me, there was that cartoon back in the 90s, Captain Planet, a bunch of global warming nonsense and propaganda. And it's all of these powers combined creates this green mulleted idiot who will come out and bring pollution down to zero. Well, I think Trump is Captain Bankrupt. He's going to bring, as the song goes, Captain Bankrupt, he's a hero. He's going to take morality down to zero. Well, that's what he's doing. That's what he is doing. He is taking away the moral compass of the Republican Party and the conservative movement, and that leaves us in a dangerous position because it takes away the force of our moral conviction to have a voice. And it also exposes us to the sort of chicanery that has become commonplace in the arena of American politics. And that is truly, literally disgusting, because it goes against everything that we hold near and dear. It goes against the edicts and traditions of our country, going back to its foundation some 235 plus years ago. And unless and until we literally begin to emerge from this shell, from this daze and haze of political confusion that we have allowed ourselves to be bottled up in, this sort of chicanery will continue unabated, and it will expand exponentially. And folks, we just cannot afford that. We cannot allow ourselves to fall prey or victim to this sort of chicanery any longer, because we lose any modicum of credibility. What is the one thing that matters the most when you are a political movement? It is your integrity. Again, it is why Sam Adams, one of our founding fathers, said that in order for our republic to be a robust and free and vibrant republic, we must have a virtuous people. It must be a virtuous republic. Well, I don't see virtue being at the top of anyone's list in this election cycle. I don't see anyone working to have virtue or to work towards virtue or to promote the values and time-honored traditions and institutions that have propelled us to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history. And that should be troubling for each and every one of us. But that does not mean that we are past the point of no return. We can save this nation, but only we can save this nation. It is going to take our sweat, tears, blood, and toil to do so. But we will, as only we can. That is the message of empowerment that we hope to deliver unto you here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. And that is what we are about. We are there to help you foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Because that is what this nation is about and has always been about. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Folks, there's no reason to fear her whatsoever. She's just there to help serve alcohol. And as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. Should you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them either here on our YouTube page or our Google Plus page or even our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, the Blogspot account where we put up audio-only versions of our state-of-the-art radio program, and then there is the Cafe Press account, where we have all sorts of trinkets and goodies at reasonable prices with our original Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo on it, or our first-class passenger logo on it. We have shoes, hats, shirts, neckties, tote bags, laptop sleeves, iPhone protectors, Android phone protectors, shot glasses, drinking glasses, watches, clocks, you name it, it's there at reasonable prices. You'll find something that fits you. And go ahead and take a look at that, folks, because every little bit of support you give us helps us continue to empower you. And I am going to leave a description, or rather, I am going to leave the Cafe Press account link in the description. So go ahead and check that out, folks. We will see you again next time. Please do take care.